Well, let's get more on this now with Phil Clark. He's a professor of international politics specialising in Africa at the School of Oriental and African Studies. He joins us now from London. Welcome to the program, Professor. As we heard there, a lot of shock to Boris Johnson's plan with Rwanda. But of course, Australia has had a similar policy in place for more than a decade now. The main aim being that it would deter arrivals from making the irregular or illegal journey to the country. How successful is a policy like that, do you think?
I think this policy has all sorts of problems to it, not least on the humanitarian front and in terms of the humane treatment of asylum seekers. You're absolutely right to raise the Australian model because, in fact, that's what the UK has copied directly. The former Australian Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, who was the architect of the offshore detention centres for asylum seekers off the coast of Australia, has been advising the UK government over the last 3 years. And one of his recommendations was that the UK government do something almost exactly like what Australia did. So Australia's fingerprints are all over what the UK is currently doing with Rwanda.
Yes, and it's interesting that Rwanda has chosen to be a part of this deal because it is seen as one of the more progressive nations in East Africa. Does this deal, do you think, perhaps compromise its standing as a country that is now seen as a leader in human rights, given the atrocities that it endured in the 90s?
This deal undoubtedly puts Rwanda in a difficult position. On the one hand, this is quite canny politics by Rwanda. It's doing quite a lucrative deal with the UK. The Rwandan economy was hit very hard by COVID. It's been looking for new economic partners. This asylum deal offers a very useful economic package at a time that Rwanda really needs it. Rwanda also likes to make itself useful to Western powers. It gives it a certain amount of political leverage over a country like the UK, that Rwanda is now going to take the UK's asylum seekers. But I think this also flies in the face of Rwanda's attempt to frame itself as standing up to Western powers, as being an important anti-imperial voice in Africa. And many African commentators in the last week have said, can Rwanda keep saying that it's independent, that it's sovereign, and that it's standing up to Western hegemony, when in fact it's now doing the West's bidding through this kind of asylum deal? So it's a deal that's useful for Rwanda in many senses, but also seems to contradict some of Rwanda's approaches over the last 20 years as well.
That's right. And Rwanda has a similar deal in place with Israel at the moment. And now we know that Denmark is in talks with Rwanda as well, looking to strike another agreement of the sort. Why is Rwanda doing this? Not just for financial reasons, of course, but does Rwanda really think that there is a social benefit in accepting these asylum seekers from Western countries?
Undoubtedly, Rwanda has a track record of treating asylum seekers and refugees very humanely. I mean, the irony of this, I think, quite problematic deal is that Rwanda will probably treat these asylum seekers better than the UK would. If you look at the Rwandan government led by President Kagame today, almost the entire ruling party itself is made up of refugees. Most of the Rwandan leaders today lived decades in exile in refugee camps in the neighboring countries. And so that, I think, brings a certain amount of sympathy towards the plight of asylum seekers and refugees. And in recent years, the Rwandan government has hosted hundreds of thousands of refugees from conflicts in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo and also Burundi. So Rwanda is pointing to that track record and saying, we are a country that cares for refugees and asylum seekers. It reflects our own history, and we will probably do a more humane job of this than the UK would. But my own view is that the UK government really should be dealing with asylum seekers and refugees on its own soil.
Okay, Professor Phil Clark, we will have to leave it there, but we really appreciate your analysis. Thanks again for joining us.